Michael, thank you so much for joining the conversation. We're happy to meet up today. We're always trying to learn new verticals in this journey of AI. So it's a pleasure to have you on board and be able to kind of talk a little bit about your business, what you do, how do you impact the people you serve, and see how innovation and technology can, maybe make an impact, right, or make a difference in the work you do. So I'll let you, Michael, kind of give a quick, brief introduction to those guests joining. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your line of work.
All right. Well, my name is Michael. I own a company called Carolina Smart Home Solutions in Greenville, South Carolina. I basically started out doing heat and air. That's my trade. I've done most of my life, and I developed a skill somehow. I don't know really where it came into play, but I started doing a lot of indoor air quality testing and situations for a couple companies I worked for, and kind of developed my skill from there. Basically, before COVID came, we didn't really have a much of a awareness of indoor air quality. Everybody just they put Glade air fresheners in, or they opened the window up and they thought it was okay. Nobody really talked about how bad the air was or what was going on as far as like excessive dust or anything like that. It was just basically, well, you just need to get. There was a couple devices in the heating and air world we could have used, and that basically was used for every problem. And a lot of times it was a situation where my a lot of the people I worked with, they would just recommend that a unit be tuned up, or a unit have something where it's situated where they would need just one device and it would fix everything. Where it could have been something as simple as the ductwork being needed to be sealed, or something that along the lines of just a basic maintenance. Just was overviewed from people. They just kind of went up. They didn't really pay attention to the details of the system and what was causing it. It was just sell something and go on to the next, person and hope for the best. That can go on so long until finally gets to a point where nobody wants to. Customers, like when they hear indoor air quality, they think, "Oh, it's just something I don't need." I want to save money and not deal with it. But I think people are starting to realize now that it's something that it's an important factor, and it does cause health issues. And your quality of air inside your house is more important than it is outside, because that's where you live at most of the time.
Yeah. No, true. Absolutely. I think that there's not a big, awareness is not there, right? Overall, I think that we take it for granted, right? And probably, the breath is the most important act that the human body can do. So you have to put yourself in the right environment, right? And I think this is something that we take for granted, always often overlooked. So being able to bring a little bit of conscience to that definitely, can bring some benefits to their life. We're going to kind of go back a little bit, talk about how do you get into this journey. You also told us in our previous conversation, you competed in quality car stereo and high quality car stereo. We'll maybe touch on that a little bit, but take me back to your grandparents. I think your grandparents had an HVAC
They did.
business.
They had they had one of the original heating and air companies in Myrtle Beach, or in Surfside, where I grew up. Back then, there was, I think, maybe 5 or 6 heating and air companies on all of Myrtle Beach area. Everybody had their own brand that they used. And my best friend, actually growing up with, his parents had the big Lennox dealership in town. And of course, we had the Train dealerships. Back then, it was a lot different than it is now. Everybody was kind of brand loyal, and you had one area that had one particular unit the sales, and somebody else had the other brands. And it wasn't like it is now, where it's everybody's on top of each other.
Right.
But they, anytime I got in trouble in school, it was had to go make duct work, or I had to go learn a skill, because they didn't know if I was going to make it to college or not. So they were preparing me for to be able to work the rest of my life and give you some sort of skill to make a living at. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where I got most of my work ethic, I guess I would say. Before I got into my more advanced, ventilation issues.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, listen, I think that a lot of these traits have been overlooked for many years, right? Learning these traits or skills obviously are phenomenal ways to make an incredible living. And I think that now, and we'll touch later on that. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but now with AI, people are looking at these traits like with more seriousness. They understand how important they are, right? Because these are things that are hard to really replace through AI, at least just yet, right? We don't have robots going around yet and doing some house services. Um, but what are the major differences from since you've been exposed to this very young in your life, right, to understanding this whole industry of HVAC to now? What are the major differences that you've seen or changes that you've seen in the niche itself, right?
I think well, obviously the number one thing is the importance of refrigeration safety. The freon or the refrigerants that we use now, they're more tailored towards a more, they're a little bit more conservative as far as the harm that they do to our atmosphere. They're always trying to improve the health of our climate, I guess, for our planet. Regardless of the cost of it, because it's now we're in a situation where sometimes we're having a hard time getting some of the new refrigerants that have just come out because they just don't have them yet. It's a one of those things that material shortages to make the freon or to actually to blend them together where they can make the right components for it. They might have an issue with something like that. So refrigerant can fluctuate from it could be anywhere from a couple $100 a bottle to several $1,000s a bottle. I mean, that can fluctuate within a month of each other. So it's an inconsistent pricing, and it's unfortunate for the homeowner because that's ultimately who has to pay for it. And then of course then there's smaller companies like myself that I might not charge as much as a bigger company does because I don't have the expense that they do. But I mean, I've been to houses where some people have been charging $300-400 a pound for refrigerant, and they have a leak and it needs to be fixed, and they just couldn't afford it, so they just had to do what they had to do to get by through the summer. And I mean, thinking like that is really in the situation now is like where we're getting with the EPA, saying that we're using too much refrigerant and it's hurting our atmosphere. And it's one of those things that there's a lot more awareness of that now than it used to be. When I first started, people used to use a 5-gallon bucket and dump the freon into that, so it would like wouldn't be as bad as just venting air and venting refrigerant out into the air. But it's we don't have practices like that anymore, thank goodness. But it's we're a lot more conscious about it. Of course, the price of any kind of refrigeration service or heating and air service has gone up like probably at least 40-50% in the last since COVID. I can remember service calls when I worked for companies. We used to charge anywhere from $50 to $75 a call. Now they're up to upwards of $250 per call. I mean, it's like the amount that people are being charged for it now is just astronomical. That's kind of like why I went out on my own, is to be able to give affordable, services to people that, not necessarily could afford, the higher companies. Not everybody can afford, a $200 service call. A lot of people are just scraping by, just trying to do what they can do to get to the next paycheck. Without air conditioning nowadays, that's, it's almost unbearable. Same thing with heat. So that's kind of like when I started doing that, I primarily focused on people that couldn't necessarily afford the higher end, companies that were charging a certain amount. I would try to do what I could to help get people to the next level. And it kind of just developed from there. And then it got into where, doctors, I had a couple of friends of mine that were doctors that, they had patients that had air quality issues, or they would have excessive dust in their house, or they had allergies really bad. And they would say, man, if you could come up with a way to, help them. And I'm like, well, I can. I'm just like, it's better filtration, and you do your basics of what causes what, and then you kind of go from there. And people that like have companies that are service based, and they make their money from getting to the next call, putting so many calls in per day, and not necessarily focusing on the important thing of the importance of the air quality, because it's time consuming. I mean, most customers I have, I might go to their house 5 to 8 times, before we get everything all the way taken care of, because you have to test for it. Then you have to find out, what the issues are causing it, fix that, and then go back and retest again. And, that takes some time. So, I mean, just going and looking at it and putting an air meter in there and saying, oh, you have this, this, and this, that doesn't solve air quality issues. I mean, that's just telling them what it is. And then you have to go back and rectify what is causing it, and then finding that
Right.
first. I've had some houses that some customers had that, they had, something as complex as the paint dye that goes into some of the paints that we use, causes a lot of VOCs. which in results is like having formaldehyde spikes in a house. And if anybody's been in a house where the formaldehyde has gotten like to a really high level through humidity and temperature swing, you can't be in the house. It's almost unbearable. It makes your eyes water, and I mean it's like a real pungent smell. And some people just go for years without even knowing about it and sell their homes because nobody's told them exactly what it was, and they have no idea how to address it. So that kind of comes into where I come into it and can able to rectify that and fix it for them.
Well, listen, I want to bring up a little bit of something you shared in our initial call. And you had, I think, 10 years of experience in EMT.
Yes.
And it's quite interesting because you kind of, that brought you back full circle, right, to kind of your grandparents' HVAC company. What were you seeing in some of those calls, right, that maybe other HVAC, let's say technicians were not seeing? And I know that probably impulsed you to go back to this industry. Tell us a little bit about what that was.
Well, like when you go to EMT school, and I was an intermediate in South Carolina. We have three different levels of basically a paramedic, an EMT, and then an EMTI. The one thing they always taught us was you look around at your surroundings. So when I was doing my service calls, I would always notice that there would be plug-in air fresheners all over the place, or there would be asthma inhalers, on tabletops, or there would be oxygen machines somewhere. So I would always pay attention to that. Then I'd look at the dust levels in the house and see if they had excessive dust, or there was because you can tell, and like a lot of times they'd be like, man, I just swept last week, or I just dusted the other day, and it's already back again. I mean, that right there tells me that is a situation where your duct has probably got a hole in it somewhere that's causing it to bring in outside air, whether it be in your attic or in your crawl space. It's bringing that unconditioned air back into your house, and it's bringing dust along with it. So over time, that it basically it deposits all the dust particles into your duct system, and then next thing you know, you're breathing a dust machine. Because you're just redistributing the dust all throughout the house, and it's recirculating itself. And that's a lot of issues with like people that have respiratory distress and have asthma, and you're different kind of like that are real sensitive to the environment. So they live in misery if they don't have a clean environment to live in. So like the better filtration you have in your house, the more sterile your air is, for lack of better words, the easier you can breathe. And those are things that like I just paid a lot of attention to it, and I noticed a lot of things that were causing some of the issues with it. And you just asking customers certain questions, like, hey, have you, how, like when I go to a customer's house now, I would ask them what's the first thing they feel when they wake up in the morning. Because if it's on an air quality issue, if there's mold in the house, or if there's any kind of like, biological issues going on, usually it'll affect your, like the way you wake up in the morning. They say you have that white frothy taste in your mouth and everything. And a lot of times that has to do with a lot of, inadequate air quality in your house. And then a lot of our customers, when I go to remit their air or improve their situations with a couple of different, methods, usually they wake up and they're like, wow, I feel better. Like I feel like I can breathe without any kind of weight on me. And that's usually what they say, is that it's easier to breathe. It's lighter to breathe, basically. So those are basically the things that I would notice, that I was able to bring from my EMT side over to this.
Right. Yeah. And also from your experience with HVAC to your EMT side. So I'm sure that, a lot of your colleagues might have, be responding to some of these calls, but you were able to maybe on the spot identify, wait a minute, that there's something going on in this house, or there's something going on here that's probably what's causing you, your complications. So, quite interesting how things just kind of lined up, and give you the more profound look into what you do. Makes sense how you all of a sudden specialize into this type of, let's say service.
Right. It's always like a cause and effect. There's always a cause that causes something else. I mean, it's like if you have high humidity in your house, there's a reason why you have high humidity. It's because it's getting brought in from outside somewhere, whether it be, a crawl space not insulated right, or like you have breaches in your house somewhere in your crawl space, or in your attic, your vents are working properly, and you're soaking all that humidity, especially in the southern climates like we have here, where humidity, like basically when your humidity gets to 60-70% in your house, I mean, you're going to have all kind of issues going on. If the dew point gets to a certain point, you're going to get mold growing in your house. You're going to get it. It's going to be in your baseboards. It's going to be up in your ceiling rafters. It's going to be in your wall. And those are things that over time, you may not notice it then, but I mean, you're going to start feeling different. And over, the longer you're exposed to that, the worse your body's going to react to it. And then now they're starting to find the connections between, you know, you've been feeling bad like this, or you've got some like radon, for instance. Radon is the number two cause of cancer on people that don't smoke in America. People that have never even smoked before are getting lung cancer, and they couldn't figure out for why. Now they're starting to link it to radon. And radon is one of those things that if you ask 10 people about what radon is, probably 5 of them are going to say they don't know what it is.
Right. Incredible. Um, Quite interesting, by the way. And yeah, I mean, your motivation, right? It's far beyond just business, right? It's really in order to help people, and you can see that in many of the ways or decisions that or how you aligned yourself, right, in your business. Let's talk a little bit about the operation. Walk me through what actually happens when somebody calls you. Um, yeah, by the time somebody reaches out, what has actually already gone wrong? Let's just say.
Usually with my customers, they've already talked to 2 or 3 different companies before I've been found. They've researched me out. Somebody's told them about me, or they've just found out of desperation, found me luckily. Because I get grouped into a category of heating and air companies, which I'm not in some sense, because I primarily deal with, air quality issues, but because we're such a new, I guess, a sub directory off of heating and air companies, we get grouped into that. So our search is like for Google and all the different advertising. It's usually, if you're advertised as an air quality expert, you're going to get no business at all. Like that, you have to be listed basically as a heating and air repair company with air quality specialties involved. But basically, somebody's already had a couple of people out there. They've looked at it, they've tried something, and it didn't work. And the customer's in a situation where they're getting sicker, or somebody in their house is getting sicker, and they're either going to have to force to remove that person from the environment, or they basically just have to keep trying and trying and trying. I had a customer in Colombia that was she bought a house, and it had a lot of formaldehyde spikes in it from the paint they were using, and it took a little while to figure out what that was. But she had several companies out. They basically just told her they needed to service their unit, and they did everything that they said they were going to do, but it still was happening. What they didn't realize that it wasn't anything to do with the heating and air system that was causing it. That was the only thing it was doing, was it was circulating it around the house. I mean, it ended up being that the paint that they used on the house when she had a painter come in, after she bought the house, it was a certain brand that mixed with the pigment of it was known to cause VOC spikes. And what it was the formaldehyde from the drywall was releasing with the paint, and it was causing it to the point where you couldn't stay in the house. When she had met me, she called me to come clean the dryer vents out, thinking that might have helped. But when I got there, I smelled it immediately, and I was told her, you've got something else going on. So she said she had called several people, and that she just didn't know what to do, and she was almost out of money because she just bought this house, and she had paid for her daughter and her granddaughter to live in a hotel for the last 6 months. So she's spent all her life savings on buying this house for them, and couldn't stay in the house because of the situation, and nobody would help her with it. Luckily, I work with a really good company called Haven, and they were one of the first companies that had monitoring for the heat and air system. So I put some monitors in the house, and I was able to look at the data and see when the events were happening, when they were spiking. I could see that it was the VOCs, the volatile organic the volatile organic compounds were actually causing, the spike in it. That's what the chemical trace was. So then we determined further, we found out it was formaldehyde through testing. So then I was able to come up with a plan and put some carbon filters in, and put an ionizer scrubber in, different specialty device that actually come on when the event would happen. And that was thanks to, using the Haven monitoring system to do that. So anytime there was a chemical spike in the house, I had right now I've got 3 years worth of data on that house. So I can see what happens in the environment on the outside, what happens on the environment on the inside, and what caused the two to happen, which would cause them to spike. So when those things would predict themselves, or when I would see that, I would already know that I needed to have my machines turn on. And I was able to remotely turn on everything I needed to eradicate that for her, when it was happening, so that they didn't have to leave the house. So that was where I cut my teeth on a lot of this. I mean, because very similar things happen in other people's houses, like spray foam. Sometimes with with them not being ventilated properly and not having any kind of outside ventilation at all, they will cause that as well. And it's one of those things that if it's not properly installed correctly, then a lot of times you'll have an issue too. And it could be any number of things. You could just have cracks in your basement floor and causing gas to come up through through your crawl space or through your basement. Anything could cause it. That's what's so beautiful about the Haven is it basically is like a generic way of seeing what's going on in the house at any given time.
Right. Well, that's quite interesting, right? That you know, basically, if you look into what actually is causing the problem, it's sometimes often by the installer himself, right? By taking these shortcuts 5 years prior when the installation happened. Do you have specifics of some of these shortcuts that might bring some of these issues out that some technicians are not even aware?
The biggest thing that causes indoor air quality issues is either an insulation issue or it's the ductwork when it's installed. The ductwork's not tight. We have codes enforced that require us to actually test to make sure that the ducts are tight. But if the ductwork's not installed correctly, you have issues where you have hot and cold rooms. You can bring moisture in through breaches in the system, especially if the unit is actually put under the house in a crawl space. It's one of those things. In general, if I put a system under a house, I always try to get the customer to encapsulate the crawl space first before we put the ductwork into that. Because if you don't, then basically anytime there's an issue with it, you're bringing air from outside under the house. It's being drawn into it and it's being brought into the house. I mean, so it's a humidity bomb right there waiting to happen. Especially like where I said our part of the country where humidity is real bad. So it's nothing worse than it being 60 degrees or 65 degrees in your house with the air conditioning on and it being 80% humidity because you've been bringing in all this wet, moist air with it. That's a huge thing. So almost any time that we do something in a crawl space, I always try to put a dehumidifier in and make sure that the crawl space is actually encapsulated so that it kind of eliminates both those problems together. So if there is a breach in the ductwork or you do get a hole in your ductwork somehow, at least you're not bringing bad air into the house and making it worse. You're kind of just making it where it's because ideally you want your crawl space to be the same kind of air that your indoor, we call it the envelope. You want the envelope to be. You want it to be the same temperature or within a reason, same temperature and the same humidity level, because it makes it where your house is much more comfortable and it's much more efficient.
Let me ask you, Michael, what does your team look like right now? Who's doing the work with you?
I've got one person that works with me right now. There's just two of us. And we do everything from encapsulation to doing the air. I do most of the air testing, but they do everything with me. I mean, we do everything. It's a small. One of those things from washing the dishes to paying the bills. It's all the same for us.
Got it. So you have a small team behind you. I mean, that follows you. So it's you're part of the small team. Tell me, you told me a little bit about you lost your shop during the hurricane. I can't even imagine, right, what that must have felt like. What was that moment, right, after that you decided this was still what you wanted to do or keep on doing?
Well, it was kind of a hard month for me. The month of October when we had the hurricane come through, I was in Southport, which is down at the coast in North Carolina. I had moved down there to basically be in the trenches of all the humidity and the moisture issues so that I could get more versed in it. When the tropical storm actually is technically what ours was on that Monday, it came through. We had 23 inches of water get in my shop in less than 45 minutes. It flooded so quick. I remember I was working late the night before it happened. I came out of a customer's house at like 11 o'clock at night. They were buying a new house and there was nobody in the house. And I had been in there for probably 6 hours by myself. And when I went outside, I was like, it's 40-mile-an-hour winds. And, it was like all the rain and just rain on the road and everything. I didn't really think about it. Because Southport, it's one of those, it's a south-facing beach. So we always got bad weather there. I didn't think much of it. And I woke up Monday morning to all the tropical storm alarms going off or whatever. Like, and my phone was ringing the emergency sirens on it. I went outside and looked, and there's like a foot of water in my driveway already. I'm like, oh gosh. So I pull it on. I look at it, and they said that the tropical storm was coming across. This the one that went through Florida first, and then came straight up. And it dumped like a crazy amount of rain on us in a certain amount of time. And this down there, there's nowhere for the water to go basically, because I lived about a mile off the actual ocean. So I was like in a depression. So you had water from all the rivers coming right down into there in the Cape Fear River and everything. And then the ocean being right there, it just kind of backfed. And the whole town, I was living in it's called City of Bowling Springs, which is right next to Oak Island. The whole town, like they had people in the neighborhoods, they were having to go get the 6-wheel trucks out and like get people out of the neighborhoods because there was so much water. It was washing the bridges out. And the main roads that we had to go into the island, there was like 3 main roads. 2 of them, the bridges washed out. I mean, like major 2-lane highway bridges, is like the sand. They said all the sediment and the sand, it hit us so quick that it washed everything out. And all, like 1 lane of the bridges, like we could completely just disappear, collapsed. I mean, there was like and we didn't really get a lot of publicity from it because 3 days later is the one that hit the mountains. So basically, because FEMA did not categorize that as a hurricane, a lot of people down there didn't get the flood insurance because they're not, it's hard to get flood insurance there. It's very expensive, and it just happens that the people I was renting from didn't have any flood insurance in my shop. And when they came back in and said that the structure was damaged beyond repair, that it would need to be rebuilt, they basically agreed to sell it, to a landowner because they couldn't afford to rebuild it. There was 3 shops that they owned right there with mine, and all 3 of us lost our shops. So came back up to Greenwood, and started my business back over then. And then I got into an accident where it was up in an attic, and I got my foot caught in a roof rafter, and it caused my foot to basically, I got a piece of the metal stuck in my foot. Wow. And it caused me to get a bone infection. So this was right after the hurricane too. So this is like a double whammy. Yeah, it ended up having to spend about 45 days in the hospital with a bone infection, and I ended up losing all my toes on my right side of my foot because of that. Basically, and then in January of this past year, I just started back over, and I've just kind of slowly been working my way back to where I was at. So I'm doing pretty good now. I just start slowly and I'm doing complicated jobs right now, so ones that take a while to do, and because I don't have the ability to go back and do 8-9 calls a day like you do doing regular service work, but luckily my job now is basically a little bit more methodical about trying to get to the bottom of what's going on before you get to the next customer.
Right.
So it's been a rebuilding. Everything's been a rebuilding process, with my body and with that.
Wow. Anyways, seems like you are resilient, right? And you stick to your goals. So I wish you a speed recovery. I mean, seems like you got it under grips now. So God bless. You told us a little bit about you spend months rehabbing your friend's dad's house, right?
Right.
It was a comment that the doctor said his lungs got better after you did that. Tell us about what was that? What did that feel like, right? That you were able to kind of help help them recover, in such way. How was that reward? How do you describe that?
It's one of those things that really hasn't. I see this person every day. I see both other people every day, and it's one of those things that I'm still improving the house to this day. Now I'm getting ready to encapsulating it, and I'm getting ready to put some insulation up in the attic of it to save it some more power bills. So the first thing was getting the house back healthy. Where he didn't have any issues with it, and it was a situation where we've all seen it. Where people they must not necessarily have all the care they need when they're getting elderly. And then, people living in, the family living in distant places, or not being able to get over there, like they should, or things, everybody has different life situations. For this one, it was one of those things that I saw a need for it to be, this needed to be taken care of immediately. So I moved myself, I agreed to move into the house to actually work on it pretty much as I could during my first part of rehab. Did what I could every day. I worked on a little bit at a time. And the biggest thing was I had to build like an indoor air purifier for the house itself, because he had to live there, and there was no way that I could get the renovations done in that amount of time. And they just didn't have the money to afford a contractor to come in, and, they would have charged them $70,000-$80,000 to redo all the stuff that we had to do. So, I mean, it was, cause when we're talking, like I had to abate, the whole laundry room was riddled with mold. So I had to basically seal all that off and abate all the mold, get it out, and then basically replace a lot of the wood that was in there that was rotted out from water damage. And then kind of just worked my way up. It's a 3-story house, it's a tri-level house. But went from there to the bedroom, and then got him taken care of. And then, like I said, he spends a lot of time in the living room. He's kind of retired, so he watches a lot of TV. So my biggest thing was getting it to where he could live in there, and not have any kind of distress on him. So, like I said, I used a huge carbon filter with some ionizers, and they turn on. They come on a couple times a day, on timers, and it was basically able to get rid of all the VOCs in the house. But when I first started it, it was off the chart. If somebody had come into the house that wasn't used to being in there, basically your eyes would tear up in water within 5 minutes. Like you couldn't stay in there 1.5 hours at a time. And think of it as like, we've all seen the cat houses or smelled the cat houses where you've had a bunch of cats in the house and they used the bathroom out of place. We'll amplify that by about 100. That's what this house was like.
Wow.
I mean, it had not had any kind of care taken in probably 20 years in it. So I felt, I felt the need to do what I could for it, and luckily today, it's probably got the cleanest air on the street now.
Well, good. I'm happy that you were able to make a difference. Seems like you really helped them a lot. Overall, if I ask you, what do you think most people in the HVAC and air quality industry are getting wrong about what their job actually is? What would you say that is?
I think just awareness of being able to recognize what's causing the issues that they're calling you for, or not trying to just sell somebody something and thinking that's going to solve the problem. Trying to really go and look and see, deep dive into what's causing the problem and then how to eradicate it without having to sell them something. Trying to do our jobs that we're trained to do. If people just pay attention or just had some awareness or train properly to see the basics. I mean, 9 times out of 10, if I go to a customer's house and there's an air quality issue, I can solve it with a higher grade air filter, especially like designing or putting a bigger air filter system into their house. And, a lot of houses, just don't have the proper, air filter size in them. That's the first thing to look at, because that's the very first thing you can do, because that's something a customer doesn't have to, continually buy light bulbs or continually upgrade it. You put like a lot of filters I put in are big 5-inch filters. So they only have to replace the filter every 6 months then. But I mean, if there's issues with like medical reasons, like with asthma, or you've got some sort of, respiratory distress issues, we have different levels of filtration you can use. Most of the houses that I put filters in, it's at hospital level or above, which is called a MERV rating. I usually use a MERV 15 or above in it. And then if you have odors or you have something in the house that's, a little bit more finicky, like a chemical that's in there, then I'll use a carbon filter as well. There's 2 companies that I usually use for those filters, and I have really good luck with them.
Let me ask you, this is kind of hypothetical, but whose responsibility is it to, let's say, figure out, if there's any issues in their environment? If somebody's getting sick at their homes, whose responsibility, in your opinion, is, right?
It's going to be one of those things that if you call a heating and air company, and we're professionals, supposed to be, they should have enough awareness to either say, yes, we see a problem, or no, we don't. And if they don't, be able to say, hey, I think you need to call somebody else for this. The problem is there's not that many of us out there that can go out to a customer's house and test, have the test equipment to find out what's going on, or the knowledge about it. You're really limited. I mean, like, as far as the actual higher stuff, like with the formaldehyde spikes and stuff like that, it takes somebody that's been in this a long time to be aware of that. And it's not something that's going to be a 1 hour, 1 hour service call. We're going to have to deep dive into finding out where it's coming from and having enough knowledge to do that. And then if you need to test for it, a lot of people don't have that test equipment, so they got to send the test results off. And it's one of those things that it's such a gray area still. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of time I had to deal with the building department people in North Carolina, like I went to go get my mechanical license there, to transfer it from South Carolina. And I was told by the director in North Carolina that all I had was indoor air quality experience. That wasn't considered heating and air experience. So I didn't have heating and air experience. And at the same time, that was what's all this is based off of. A lot of times, is inadequate heating and air performance that's causing the issues. So a lot of people are still in the dark, or just refuse to agree that a lot of the problem that we are causing is from inadequate heat and air, installations.
Hmm.
It's because if you bring if you bring moisture, you bring dirt, and you bring a certain temperature to a party, you're going to get mold any way you look at it. And if you're not getting mold, you're getting excessive dust, or you're getting any kind of other organics that are getting brought in with it, and we're off to the races. I mean, because it doesn't take but just one situation to cause several bad situations in a home, and of course, if it doesn't get caught or it gets keeps going on for on and on, then you've got an issue like where I found here, where it was the whole there was the bathroom upstairs in the house I was working on had the ceiling fan or the ceiling exhaust was hooked up, but nobody hooked it up to the ceiling or no, hooked it up to the exhaust and the roof. They just vented it into the actual attic. So, and then there was a hole in the floor underneath the cabinet that was bringing the moisture from downstairs from the laundry room up, and then got that heat generated from the dryer, basically bringing the heat and moisture up with it with the water in the shower. So, you can imagine the whole attic was covered in mold. I mean, so the situations like that's a perfect example of what that was. And so all this house was doing was basically getting mold or was getting moist air and wet air from the two levels before it, and basically getting sucked up into the attic where it's hot, already, and there's plenty of bare wood up there for it to get to, and there's plenty of dirt and debris up there for it to start attaching to. So you have a organic farm up there. It's one,
Yeah.
and it could if somebody would have just put the right exhaust fan or exhausted the fan out like they were supposed to, probably wouldn't happen like that.
Yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
prime example of how that works.
Yeah. Listen, quite interesting, right? I would say, I think the education, right? There's a lot of education missing also in the homeowners, point of your side. What would you say, or what would you hope that some homeowners would consider, right? And because sometimes by the time that they take any action, is sometimes already too late, right? What do homeowners need to be aware of, right? To be able to say, wait a minute, this is something that needs attention, right? This is something that I should, take action on, right? What are some of those signs that you say, you need to call a specialist?
When you have excessive dust in your house, like if you go and
Hmm.
clean your house or have it cleaned, and then a week later you have dust back on the floor all over the place or over the walls, that's a key thing, because that's bringing a lot of the food in for the stuff to grow off of, the organics to grow off of. If your humidity in your home is above 55 to 60%, you definitely need to get a dehumidifier. You have somebody install one for you. And then you need to find out where it's coming from. You've got water or moisture infiltrating your house somewhere. I mean, it's causing that. So whether it be from having inadequate insulation, and having just pure breaches in your home, it basically gets brought in. And then the biggest thing is like having your duct system designed properly for your house, because if your duct system is not doing what it needs to do, basically you can put your house in what's called a negative pressure. And then so you're basically, as soon as you open up your door, all that air from inside is basically getting lost, because the outside air is going to get pulled into it, and then it's going to push it out. And then you're in a situation where you could have had your air conditioning on for 6 hours, and it finally got your humidity back down to a certain degree, and it got the temperature where you needed it to be, and it's 100 degrees outside. But when you open up that door, all of that 100-degree air just went into the house, and it just changed your house temperature by 15 degrees or so. I mean, and that happens over time, like with cracks in your door, and places where you can see daylight through it. I mean, those are all situations where that brings that air in, and bringing enough of it in will cause a whole different issue. And that's what starts usually the bad problems that are going on with people's homes.
Well, listen, Michael, let's pivot into a little bit about AI, right? Tell me about AI. How to use it in your personal life right now, if you're using it, even casually. First of all, before you answer that, what's your sentiment around AI, right? How do you feel about what's going on, and this wave of innovation coming into impacting society right now?
I think it's going to be something that's going to be good for a lot of people. I have had some experience with it, very little, but from what I've had, it's been positive. But I did notice that what you put into it is what you get out of it also. I know some people just think you can go type in something and get the magic answer for it, but a lot of times that's not the case. You need to put in all the different parameters for the programs to work properly. I used it this weekend. I have a friend of mine that I compete in car stereos with. We were building him a new box for his subwoofer, and I used the generator to come up with the plans for it. And each speaker has a recommended volume of air that it needs, and I typed them all into it and everything, and it came back with the incorrect answer at first. So I had to go back and re-download some stuff, and then I put all the manufacturer specs into it, and then it came up with a very accurate, good sounding, piece of equipment for it. But it was one of those things at first, it didn't catch it. So I think people just need to be aware of what they're asking it and if it has all the different information that it needs before you get an answer. And then I would recommend just to double check it for sure. I mean, but I think on the very simple processes, the day-to-day stuff, like the stuff that we all hate doing, like putting in for bookkeeping and stuff like that, I think it's going to be very good to help with the repetitiveness of it. And from what I found, as far as what it can do for me, as soon as I can find a program that works, I think it'll. A lot of times, I just rely on the cloud-based services I have to actually alert me if there's an issue with air quality in somebody's home. But if I could actually have enough logic built into something where it could decide or I could put the parameters of what I needed it to do for me, I think that would be really great, because then it would free me and let me do even more to help more people without having to basically continually look at other customers' houses. It could kind of help me with that and streamline my services a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a hypothetical, right? You do have 3 years of hour by hour data on your own home, right? You watched formaldehyde spike happen and connected it to a paint that was off gassing, right? If a young technician had AI tools available today, what would you want it to do for them that ChatGPT cannot do right now?
Be able to download real world experience every day as it happened and keep growing the database so that because if it happens one place, it's going to happen somewhere else. And there's other people in the country that have had that same issue happen. It's just basically connecting all that information together. I mean, because there's still a lot of stuff that doesn't get brought out. I mean, like the whole air quality thing. You could have 200 people in one city, and then there'd be 500 in another city, but they would not even know about each other, not even issued with it. They would just think, oh, they live in a house that's got a smell that they can't get rid of. We've all heard of that, but we don't know why. If you had somebody that came across it but had the awareness of it, they could easily address it for them. It's one of those things, and it would level it. It's not like a playing field leveling, but it's more of an awareness to help customers, because there's enough work out there in my line of work that everybody in the country could be doing it, because it's going to get worse and worse as our environment changes. And as more we stay home, and the more we work from home, the more we're going to spend more time there, the more there's going to be a need for it. Because there's so many customers out there now that have no idea how, what to do. They're at a loss. I had one of my customers in Oak Island. She lived on Bald Head Island, the next island over from us, and it's a real exclusive town. You have to have a boat to get over to the island. So they're all wealthy people there, but she had just bought like a $3 million beach home, probably about 8 or 9 years ago. Her floors were ruined from basically the duct system was put in under the house, and it brought in salt air and moist air into the house to the point where it's making her brand new hardwood floors buckle. And her husband had just passed away, so she was on limited income. Yes, they had a very expensive, nice house, but it was already bought and paid for. She's living month to month off her retirement now. And she barely had it. She couldn't afford to get the hardwood floors fixed. So she ended up leaving the house and going back up to Rhode Island, I think, where she was from. I mean, basically turn the house back over to the bank. I mean, it was, situations like that, so if people would have been aware, if she would have had technicians that were aware of that 5 or 6 years ago when they first put the system in and said, hey, you've got, this is going on, then they might have been able to save her house. I mean, so if somebody else knew about that and knew what to look for, it would be a lot better situation for everybody.
Yeah.
I think it would help.
Touching up. Uh-huh.
I think it would help more people.
Go ahead.
It would help more people. It would help people be more accountable for what they're doing on the installs also.
Right. Let me ask you, are there any, let's say, groups between HVAC and air quality technicians that, kind of share data or information? And with that being said, would a model specific for this industry benefit, right? Because then you can really kind of feed the model, just for that sector, and you might be able to not necessarily get the exact precise angle, but at least it'll give you some sort of direction as to where you know you might find what you're looking for. Do you think this would be something useful in the vertical in your field?
It would be useful, but to get owners that have been in business for 20, 30 years to agree to do something like that would probably be very little, because it's a pride
Got it.
thing. It's something
Mm-hmm.
that this is such a new concept of looking at stuff. It's like down there at the beach. Everywhere they're still putting systems in down there that were, we were doing practices we were doing 25 years ago. You know, there's about 6 states in the country that are very progressive as far as their energy efficiency and the way of thinking as far as the air quality now. And they're all up north. It's Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and New York, and a couple other ones up there. They're really progressive as far as like trying to get this under control. But until the rest of the country, the rest of the states get into it, it's going to stay where it's at. I think it right now it's had so much pushback on it. I mean, I know the air fragrances and everything, they're a huge industry. But for some reason, air quality just cannot get the publicity it needs. For some reason, it's just being held back, and who knows what it is up in Washington that's causing that. But I mean, EPA will put out a new rule and then it'll get reversed, a year later or something. So it's like, I don't really, that's something I don't really get into that much. I don't try to get into it, because that's a whole nother thing. But I just, I feel like, it's something's causing us not to be as aware as we need to be of it. I mean, it doesn't get the publicity that we needed. So back to your original question, as far as that goes, yes, I think a model we have like programs, specific for like applications that are specific for the trade, but they're always, there's always something else causing it, or there's always something sponsoring it, like when I first got into this, there was an air quality meter we could use, but it had basically 6 or 7 different manufacturers that were paying money to have their stuff broadcasted on there. That's basically using that tool to position them into a better sales position. I mean, we need to be unbiased when it comes to, we need to pick the right equipment regardless of who sells it,
Yeah.
Yeah. It needs to be about the customer, right? Then not about how much we can make off of it.
Of course. And ultimately, you said something very, very interesting, right? It needs to be about the, helping the customer, right? Ultimately, the tools that are going to survive are the ones that the customers will be accepting, whether it's directly or indirectly, meaning if it can't move the needle in the guest satisfaction, the customer satisfaction, then it's probably not going to be a useful tool. I think that we often try to look at AI solutions from how does it move the needle right now, immediately, right? Is there a way that can make me more money right now? But there are often those tools that not necessarily you'll see the return on investment at the moment, but through guest satisfaction, but customer satisfaction, in this case, is where you're definitely going to see something that sticks, right, in the market. In your opinion, for the next 2-3 years, where, this is a bit more envisioning, but where would you say, if you had a magic wand, right, and you say, wow, if this AI tool would exist, or if it was built, this would really change the sector, right, the field itself?
Something I've been working on and that I think it would be a huge benefit for is I've always been working on the idea of like onboard monitoring. So like they have home security systems that do monitoring, basically having monitoring for air quality, and having, like programs in place to help you with that. So you could do a larger amount of people and not have to, they could do your quality checks for you. It's one of those things that that would eliminate a huge need for, I mean, like if you have an elderly patient if you have an elderly person that lives in a home and their siblings, their daughters and sons basically live in another state or live in another town, you basically can have that monitoring system in place so that you can see what's going on. So if you live out in California and see like excessive like carbon smoke in the house from wildfires, or if you live, in the South and you see too much humidity in the house, you see those things affect elderly patients a lot more than they affect, anybody else or young people or their animals. That's usually who it affects first. and you might be able to get a chance to solve that problem or correct an issue before it happens where they have to go to a nursing home quicker. I mean, you might extend them out 5 to 10 years in their home still, to give them a little bit more time before they have to have full-time care. And that can be a lot of difference for families, especially with as much as assisted living care costs now. I mean, so it's a situation where that, and that might be, to me, that would be worth it to have my parent back at home for, 5 to 10 years. If, I knew that I could extend their life, their quality of living out, but, where they might not necessarily have that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I don't think we could be too far away from that, Michael. Are there already devices that you can go into a home and say, poop, take a sample or read the air quality at the moment? It's all a matter of taking those devices and getting the data out to a model that is able to, give you those signals, right?
There is. I have about 5 customers that have some really high end issues right now, and they're kind of like the higher acuity level of where I try to help. They have, like I said, they have some young children and some elderly people in their homes, and they've had known issues. So if there is an issue that they have, while I'm monitoring them, I can look at my phone on the app and I can look at every one of their air quality, their temperature, and what's going on in the house. I can tell, like one of my first customers, her daughter's boyfriend was in the bathroom smoking one of those vaporized cigarettes one night at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it set the meter off. And of course, I got an email, and she's already calling me wondering because she's the customers have the same app I do. She's wondering what's going on, and I'm like, you need to go look in the bathroom. And then sure, because there's certain characteristics of, like, you can tell what different chemicals are and how they spike, and what's man-made and what's not. Like cooking oils will spike it real bad. Like cigarette smoke, like the vaporizer smoke, those things will set it off to the point where what it is. After doing this while enough. And she went and busted him for being in the bathroom smoking a cigarette. And like he's trying to figure out how in the world that she was in California and she knew that he was in the bathroom smoking a cigarette. Had no idea what was going on. And so that's how sensitive they can be, and that's how much you can pinpoint to what's going on, and that helps with elderly people.
All right. Well, it seems like we're not too far away. Then we can definitely build something that is proactive in that sense. Yeah. I mean, listen. From now until that happens, you can definitely rest assured that it's a matter of people understanding how important it is, right, to really live in the right, safe environment for them and their families. For those that are listening right now and maybe want to reach out to get a little bit more insight as to, how do they approach understanding how safe their environment is right now. Where can they reach you, Michael? And maybe what would you recommend they do, right, to inform themselves?
They can just call me direct, or they can email me. You can give them my email address, or they can reach me on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page as well, and I've got a web page. So any of those contact points they can get me at, and I'd be more than happy to talk to them about it or try to recommend somebody in their area. Usually, like I travel in North Carolina and South Carolina, maybe a little bit of Georgia. I really don't go too much further than that, but I can certainly try to find somebody in their area for them. I mean, you just want to find the most knowledgeable person you can in your area that's focused more on the quality of their work than, just going and trying to sell them something or having enough knowledge to do it. I took the chance, like I said, back in 2021, and basically made my company solely for air quality first and then heating and air second. I mean, and it's, people said I was stupid for doing that, but that's what I've always been. I've always done it that way, and I won't, it's going to the way it's going to stay. I mean, because there's a need for it. And I'd rather get starved 1 month than, 2 months later be able to help somebody and know that they, that I was able to make an impact on their life and able to help them with their quality of life a little bit better.
Well, listen, Michael, I really appreciate you joining the call. Very educational. Definitely your heart. We can see that you do things with not just, with the real and right intentions. hopefully we'll be able to kind of, in a way, collaborate and find some of those solutions that are definitely going to make a difference, right? So again, thank you for this conversation, and hopefully we'll get to reconnect sometime in the future and then see where we're at. All right.
Okay. All right. Man,
Awesome.
appreciate it. You guys have a good day.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you.